We continue now at the top of Daf Tesvav Amud Beis in Meseches Kiddushin. This is Kiddushin Daf 15b. On the previous Amud, the Gemara asked, who is the Tana that does not hold of the Gezerah Shaveh of Sacher, which compares the different kinds of Eved Ivri to one another? And the Gemara says that Tana is Rebbe, as we learn in the following Brisa. The Brisa quotes the Pasuk, Vim lo yigoel ba'ela. It says if he's not going to be redeemed with these. And Rashi says, Vim lo yigoel ba'ela b'nimkar la'ovid kochavim ksiv. We're talking here in the Pasuk about somebody who's sold to a non-Jew, and it's talking about being redeemed from the non-Jew. Rebbe says, Be'ela hu nigal ve'ena nigal b'sheish. He's redeemed with these, meaning when his relatives pay to redeem him from the non-Jew, that's a way that he goes free, or rather, that's a way that he's redeemed. However, he does not go free, or he's not redeemed after 6 years. Rashi says, Be'ela bekrovim, d'chsiv la'el minei, ododo v'gomer. It talks about the different relatives that would redeem this Eved who gets sold to the non-Jew. And again, he's redeemed through a redemption from the relatives, but he's not redeemed after 6 years. Sheyachol, because you might have said as follows, you might have thought, v'halo dinu, that it makes sense as follows. Umami she'eno nigal be'ela nigal b'sheish. If when it comes to somebody who's not redeemed through relatives, let's say you have a situation of somebody who's sold to a Jew, he has a Jewish master, so there's no halach of redemption by relatives, but he's redeemed after 6 years. Zesh and nigal be'ela, so this situation where the person is owned by Ovid Kochavim, he's owned by non-Jews, so in such a situation, he is redeemed through Krovim, he's redeemed through relatives, Eino din shen nigal b'sheish, shouldn't he be redeemed after 6 years? Talmud Lomar, so that's what the Pasuk says, be'ela, it says with these. Be'ela hu nigal ve'ein nigal b'sheish. He's redeemed in this fashion, but he's not redeemed after 6 years. And Rashi explains, Uma misha eno nigal be'ela nimkar li Yisrael lo ksiv bei geulas krovim. When someone's sold to a Jew, it doesn't talk about, it's not written over there about the redemption by relatives. To lo nafkulan mi v'aftei legulas atzma. All we learn about is she redeems herself. We don't learn the idea that the relatives redeem. And so in any case, that's what Rebbe says in this brisa. He says the halach of 6 years does not apply to one who is sold as an Eved to the non-Jews. And so the Gemara now says as follows: V'salka daitach yolef sacher. If you think that Rebbe makes the Gezerah Shaveh sacher, amai ko'amar umami she'eno nigal be'ela. Why does he say that somebody, meaning a regular situation of an Eved, of a Jew, the master is a Jew, he says that he's not redeemed through the relatives? Why is that the case? Neilev sacher. We should learn the Gezerah Shaveh sacher over there as well, and say that just like relatives redeem when he's owned by a non-Jew, relatives can also redeem when he's owned by a Jew. So apparently Rebbe does not make the Gezerah Shaveh of sacher. Rashi says, Neilev sacher geulas krovim lenimkar li Yisrael mi nimkar lo v'kochavim. We should learn a case where he's sold to a Jew from a case where he's sold to a non-Jew, and in both cases we should say there's redemption of the relatives. The v'nimkar lo v'kochavim nami ksiv kisachir shana b'shana ye'imo. The word sacher is also written when it talks about one who sold to a non-Jew. The word sacher is written over there by the one sold to a non-Jew. It's written by the one who sold to a Jew by mocher atzma when he sells himself, and also when he's sold by Bezdin. So again, if you're going to make that Gezerah Shaveh, this halacha being redeemed by relatives should apply also in the situation where he's owned by a Jew. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, Liolam yolef sacher. Really, we can say that Rebbe does learn the Gezerah Shaveh of sacher. V'shani hachan, it's different over here, de Amar Kra, because the Pasuk says Yigol Lenu, it says he's redeemed lozeh v'lo la'acher. It means for this one and not for another one. And Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak is referring to the pasuk which says, "Ododo vendodo yigolenu." Again, it says his relatives are going to redeem him yigolenu, and it applies only specifically to him, and it doesn't apply to the one that's owned by a Jewish master. And the Gemara continues, Uman Tana de Poligoleh de Rebbe, who are the Tanoim who argue on Rebbe? The Gemara says to that, Rabbi Yossi Haglili Rebbe Akiva. It's Rabbi Yossi Haglili and Rebbe Akiva. And Rashi says, the Pligi Oleh, the Rebbe, that they argue with Rebbe, Va'amri, the Nimkar lo Ovid Kochavim. They say that if you have an Eved that's sold to Ovid Kochavim, to the non-Jews, Yotze L'Sheish, they say that he does go out after 6 years. Again, Rebbe learned from the word Be'ela that only with the redemption of relatives he goes free. He doesn't go free after 6 years. But these Tanoim, they're going to use Be'ela for something else, and therefore they're going to say that he does go free after 6 years. Rashi says, Rabbi Yossi Haglili de Mapik Hai Be'ela Lidrasha Achrisi, as we'll see in a moment, they're going to use the Be'ela for something else. And the Gemara explains the Tanya as we learned in a Brisa. Lo yigol ba'ela, again the same pasuk, if he's not redeemed with these in this fashion through relatives. Rabbi Yossi Aglili Omer, Rabbi Yossi Aglili says, what do we understand from the word ba'ela? Ba'ela l'shichra b'shar kol adam l'shibud. What it means is, if the relatives redeem him, he goes free. But let's say somebody else redeems him who's not a relative, he actually continues his servitude. He's going to be an eved to the person who redeems him. And Rabbi Akiva Omer, Rabbi Akiva says it's the other way around. Ba'ela l'shibud, if his relatives redeem him, then he's going to continue to serve. He's going to serve the relative that redeemed him. B'shar kol adam l'shichra. But if somebody else were to redeem him, so then he would actually go free. The exact opposite of Rabbi Yossi Aglili. But in any case, you see that both Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi Aglili, they use be'ela for something else, and therefore after 6 years in such a situation where his master's a non-Jew, he would go free. And the Gemara analyzes the machlokas between Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva. My time with Rabbi Yossi Aglili. What's the reason of Rabbi Yossi Aglili? Why does he darsh in the pasuk to say that he goes free by the relatives, by other people he continues shibud? Amar Krotz, because the pasuk says, Im lo yigoel be'ela, Ella ba'acher. It says that if he's not redeemed with these, rather he's redeemed by somebody else, so then v'yotza b'shnas hayovel, then he doesn't go free right away, he only goes free in Yovel. Rabbi Akiva says, no, you darshan as follows, Im lo yigoel ella be'ela. If these are the ones who redeem him, meaning if it's the relatives who redeem him, v'yotza b'shnas hayovel, then he goes free in Yovel, meaning to say he continues his servitude until Yovel. And the Gemara continues, Rabbi Yossi Aglili, but Rabbi Yossi Aglili will respond to Rabbi Akiva, Midi Ella Be'ela Ksiv. Does it say Ella Be'ela in the pasuk? Rabbi Akiva is darshaning, Im lo yigoel be'ela, as if it says, Im lo yigoel Ella Be'ela, but it doesn't say that. That's not a good explanation at all. And so the Gemara says, actually, that's correct. That's not really Rabbi Akiva's explanation. Ella B'hai Kro Kamiflagi. Actually, the machlokas between Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva is as follows. It's the following pasuk. Ododo ovendodo yigolenu. Again, it talks about the relatives redeeming. Zeg ulas krovim. That pasuk refers to the redemption by relatives. Ohisigo yado. Then it talks about the fact that he himself has the money. Zeg ulas atmo. That refers to him redeeming himself. Vinigol. And then when the pasuk says he's redeemed, zu ulas acherim. That refers to other people, non-relatives, redeeming him. So you have all three mentioned in the pasuk, and it's just a question of how you darshan what the pasuk exactly means. Rabbi Yossi Aglili says, Mikra nidrash lefanav, you darsh in the pasuk going on what's before it. And so therefore you say, Shadi Geulas Krovim a Geulas Atzmo. When we talk about Geulas Krovim, so you understand that that's connected with Geulas Atzmo. Ma Geulas Atzmo, just like by Geulas Atzmo l'shichrar, it's referring to the fact that he goes free. Obviously, if he redeems himself, he's going to go free. Af Geulas Krovim l'shichrar. So to when the relatives redeem him, he's going to go free. That's how Rabbi Yossi Aglili learns. Rabbi Akiva Savar, but Rabbi Akiva says, Mikra Nidrash liachrav, you actually darshan the pasuk for what's after it, and therefore Shadi Geulas Acherim, Geulas Atzmo. Therefore, it's the Geulas Acherim, which is the thing that's connected with Geulas Atzmo. Geulas Acherim is written after Geulas Atzmo. Ma Geulas Atzmo l'shichrar, just like when we're talking about redeeming himself, he goes free. Af Geulas Acherim l'shichrar. So to the Geulas Acherim, that's also when he goes free. But the Gemara then says, but if that's the case, it has nothing to do with Be'ela. The entire reason we bring this brisa was to say that Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva, they use Be'ela for something else. And so the Gemara says, Ihachi Be'ela Lomali. If so, what are we using Be'ela for? And the Gemara says to that, Ilav be'ela, if not for the word be'ela, hav amina. So then I would have said, Mikra nidrash bein lefanav bein liachrav, that the pasuk is darshan in both directions. V'akol l'shechra, and therefore we would say that in all situations he actually goes free, because again, the way the pasuk is formulated, ohisiga yado, the Geulas Atzmo is written right in the middle. So I would have darshan in both directions. And so therefore you need be'ela to say it's only going to go in one direction. But the Gemara says, Yachi, but if so, if it's really the be'ela that's determining which direction we darshan, so then we're really back to our original question. We're really back to the question that Rabbi Akiva's position doesn't really make sense, because he's understanding it as im lo yigoel ela be'ela. It doesn't say ela in the pasuk, and we really are using be'ela to create the drasha. And so the Gemara instead says ela, rather the real machlokas between Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva is as follows: b'svaro kamiflagi. They're arguing when it comes to logic. Rabbi Yossi Aglili holds mistabra geulas acherim l'shibud. It makes more sense to say that if he's redeemed by non-relatives, then he continues servitude. Diamr l'shichur, because if you're going to say that he goes free in that case, so have a mimni v'lo parkile, so then they're going to refrain, they're not going to bother freeing him. Why would a stranger redeem him if he's not going to continue on to be that stranger's servant? Rabbi Akiva holds mistabra gulas krovim l'shibud. It makes more sense to say that when the relatives redeem him, then he continues his servitude. Diamr l'shichur, because if you're going to say that he goes free when the relatives redeem him, every day the guy's going to decide to sell himself. He'll make some money by selling himself as an eved, and he can always rely on his relatives to set him free. And Rashi explains, Rabbi Yossi savar mikra nidrash lefonav. Rabbi Yossi holds the pasuk is darshan on what's before it. Geulas atzmo pshita lon dehav l'shichur. Meaning the idea is as follows: that middle phrase of the pasuk when he redeems himself, that's obvious he goes free. That's teaching us about some other kinds of redemptions that also go free. So according to Rabbi Yossi, it teaches us what happens when the relatives redeem. That's the phrase right before it. When you use a pasuk to teach us something, it goes on the phrase before it, which is written right above. And therefore, therefore it's the redemption of relatives that's connected with his redemption of himself. Again, you learn one from the other. So therefore you learn gulas krovim, that in that case he goes free according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Rabbi Akiva says the opposite, la'acharav, you learn after it, haksuva lamata himenu, what's written below, hilkach gulas atzma melamedes al gulas acherim. Therefore, we learn that if other non-relatives redeem, that's where he goes free like gulas atzma. Al malimad gulas acherim mi gulas atzma. Again, you learn gulas acherim from gulas atzma. And Rashi continues, the Gemara then said, Hava Amina, let's say we did not have the Be'ela, Aval Hashda Dechsiv Be'ela, but now that we have the Be'ela, Lomar Sheyesh Chiluk Bein Eila La'acherim, so we're making a distinction between relatives and non-relatives, so Lamar Kid Islay, Lamar Kid Islay, again, we make that distinction according to each one the way he darshans. But then the Gemara said, Hihachi, if so, Devi Alma Nidrish Lafan of Uli Achrav, that really we would darshan in both directions. V'acham Mishum Dechsiv Be'ela Hu, and it's only because of the word Be'ela, so we are relying on Be'ela. So Hadr Koshi Laduchte, we're back to our original question. To Rabbi Akiva, if that's the case, so it doesn't say Ella Be'ela, so how is it that Rabbi Akiva is understanding that in the case of the V'yotza B'shnas HaYovel, how does he understand that that's referring to Krovim, that that's referring to relatives? It would not make sense to say that in that particular situation, that's where he continues the servitude, and by strangers he goes free, because then you have to put in the word Ella. And so the Gemara instead says, Ella bisvara pligi. Rather, you have to say, the machlokus really is in logic. Kolomer and Rashi explains what that means to say is as follows, Ipshita lon dehai be'ela akrovim koi. Let's say it's obvious that the word be'ela certainly is going on relatives, and we're certainly saying that by the relatives in the simple reading of the pasuk, it means to say that he goes free when the relatives redeem him. Al karchach shiba diyotze b'shnas hayovel acherim ishtama. Then yes, it would be true like Rabbi Yossi Aglili says, the going free at Yovel would be when non-relatives redeem him. But that's not what's happening. Ella b'svara pligi. Rather, they're arguing in terms of logic. Ihai be'ela akrovim koi o acherim koi. They're really arguing this word be'ela, what is it referring to? This word be'ela, is it referring to the relatives, or is it referring to others? Meaning to say, if we knew that the word be'ela, that these refers to the relatives, it's obvious that the relatives, when they redeem, he goes free. We're actually arguing whether the word be'ela refers to the relatives or the non-relatives, to achirim nami bahu kraksiva, because it just says be'ela, these, it's not specified. The pasuk mentions both non-relatives and relatives, and so to that's what they're arguing about in terms of what the word be'ela actually means, but they darshan the word in the same fashion. Rabbi Yossi Aglili savar mistabra acherim l'shibud dehai be'ela akrovim koi the shibud deviyotza b'shnas hayovel acherim diyamrit. Again, Rabbi Yossi Aglili says it's more logical that he goes free when the relatives redeem him. Rabbi Akiva savar mistabra akrovim shibud. Really, it makes more sense to say that when we're talking about the relatives, the servitude continues v'hai ela acherim koi, and when it's the non-relatives, that's when we say ela, that's when we say he goes free. V'shibud diyotze b'yovel akrovim koi. Again, the continuation of shibud until yovel, that's by the relatives, and each one has their own logic for that issue. And again, according to both of them, be'ela is used for this purpose, and be'ela is not used to say in terms of the 6 years, because according to Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva, in the situation of an eved that's owned by Oved Kochavim, he would go free after 6 years. And the Gemara continues, Amar Reb Chia bar Abba, Amar Reb Yochanan. Reb Chia bar Abba says that Reb Yochanan says, Zu divrei Reb Yossi Aglili v'Rebbe Akiva. This is the opinion of Reb Yossi Aglili and Rebbe Akiva. They're the ones who say, they make a distinction between relatives and non-relatives in terms of when he goes free and when he continues his servitude. Aval Chachamim Omer, but the Chachamim say, Hakol l'shichur. In all cases of redemption, whether it's relatives or non-relatives, he goes free. And the Gemara explains, Man Chachamim, so who's the Chachamim? Rebbe, that's the same Rebbe we had above. The Mapik Le, L'hai Be'ela l'drasha achrida. He uses Be'ela for the other drasha. Again, according to Rebbe, he uses Be'ela to say that the individual who is owned by the non-Jew does not go free after 6 years. That's what Be'ela is for. So therefore, since Be'ela is used for something else, so when it comes to relatives and non-relatives, both of them, according to Rebbe, he is going to go free. Umikra nidrash bein lefanov uvein la'achrav. The pasuk is going to be darshan before and after. Again, both relatives and non-relatives. In both cases of redemption, he's going to go free. And the Gemara continues, V'Rebbe hai v'yotza b'shnas hayovel ma'ovid. Now, what does Rebbe do with the pasuk of v'yotza b'shnas hayovel? If Rebbe is saying he goes free in all situations of redemption, and the Gemara says to that, miboile l'chidetanya, he used it for the following brisa, v'yotza b'shnas hayovel. Again, the pasuk says v'yotza b'shnas hayovel, and Rashi says l'chidetanya l'lamedcha. That's to teach you sha'af al pi she'ovid kochavim tachas yodcha. Even though the ovid kochavim is under your control, under the Jewish control, im lo yigol yishtabid bo ad hayovel, but still, we're going to say that if he's not redeemed, the Jew should continue to be the Eved to the Ovid Kochavim all the way until Yovel. And you're not allowed to go, you're not allowed to use the fact that you have power over the Ovid Kochavim to extract the Eved and to say he's no longer an Eved to the Ovid Kochavim. You can't do that. Absent a redemption, the Avdus needs to continue until Yovel. We will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Zayin Amud Aleph.